You may be familiar, but in 1972, an Uruguayan rugby team experienced a plane crash over the Andes Mountains. And after 8 days, the survivors heard the devastating news that they had just been assumed dead and that the rescue mission had been called off. So they now knew that there was no one looking for them and that they were considered dead. But one survivor, Nando Prado, hopefully that's good Spanish, had lost his mother and sister in a crash, and he nearly died himself, and yet he refused to believe that the story was over. So after 72 days, which must have felt like an eternity, stranded on that mountain, him and another survivor made an impossible decision, that they were going to walk out. They didn't have a map. They didn't have any climbing gear. They didn't have experience doing this. They had no guarantee that they were headed even in the right direction, and yet they made the decision, and for 10 days, they just walked across these snow-covered peaks. And every step could be their last, but they just kept going. Eventually, they found help, and because they did this, all of the 16 remaining survivors were rescued. And if you think about that in life, you know, there are times when it feels like heaven has stopped its search, where we may feel on our own, prayers seem unanswered, doors seem like they're closed, and hope can grow thin. And what I want to encourage you about today is that faith keeps taking the step forward, even though we don't see the path and we don't see the outcome yet. Today's message is called Don't Stop Believing. And I know there's already a song running through your mind right now. You're welcome for that. There's a lot worse songs that could be going through your mind. But here's the question. The song asks us to not stop believing. My question is this: believing in what? Because why should someone not stop believing when everything is stacked against them and the odds are not in their favor? What are they actually believing in? Are we believing in belief itself, in positive mental attitude? No, for me, I don't think that's quite enough to push through. If we're going to say don't stop believing, we can only mean that sentiment when there is something real that we can put our belief in, or someone, which is exactly what we're going to talk about. We've been going through the Gospel of Mark, and today we're going to continue that journey. If you have your Bibles or Bible apps, you can open them up to Mark chapter 5. We're going to see three people that are in dire need today, and we're going to see what happened when those needs were brought before Jesus. And we'll see that it makes perfect sense for us to not stop believing when Jesus is the source and substance of our faith. So as we explore these three things about Jesus, it can encourage us today. I don't know what you're going through, but God does. And my prayer today is that this will encourage you, help build up your faith, and help you keep pressing on even when it gets hard to do so. So let's read the text and then we'll dig in. We're going to read it in one chunk today. Matthew 5, picking it up in verse 21. If you don't have your Bibles or Bible apps, words will be on the screen. When Jesus had again crossed over by the boat to the other side of the lake, a large crowd gathered around him while he was by the lake. Then one of the synagogue leaders named Jairus came, and when he saw Jesus, he fell at his feet. He pleaded earnestly with him, "My little daughter is dying. Please come and put your hands on her so that she will be healed and live." So Jesus went with him. A large crowd followed and pressed around him, and a woman was there who had been subject to bleeding for 12 years. She had suffered a great deal under the care of many doctors and had spent all she had. Yet instead of getting better, she grew worse. When she had heard about Jesus, she came up behind him in the crowd and touched his cloak because she thought, if I just touch his clothes, I will be healed. Immediately, her bleeding stopped, and she felt in her body that she was freed from her suffering. At once, Jesus realized that power had gone out from him. He turned around in the crowd and asked, "Who touched my clothes?" "You see the people crowding against you," his disciple answered, "and you can ask, 'Who touched me?'" But Jesus kept looking around to see who had done it. Then the woman, knowing what had happened to her, came and fell at his feet, trembling with fear, told him the whole truth. He said to her, "Daughter, your faith has healed you. Go in peace and be freed from your suffering." While Jesus was still speaking, some people came from the house of Jairus, the synagogue leader. "Your daughter is dead," they said. "Why bother the teacher anymore?" Overhearing what they said, Jesus told him, "Don't be afraid. Just believe." You may want to write that down. That's a word for someone today. Don't be afraid. just believe. He did not let anyone follow him except Peter, James, and John, the brother of James. When they came to the home and the synagogue leader, Jesus saw a commotion with people crying and wailing loudly. He went and said, "Why all this commotion and wailing? The child's not dead, but asleep." But they laughed at him. After he put them all out, he took the child's father and mother and the disciples who were with him and went in where the child was. He took her by the hand and said to her, "Talitha cum," which means, "Little girl, I say to you, get up." Immediately, the girl stood up and began to walk around. She was 12 years old. At this, they were completely astonished. He gave strict orders not to let anyone know about this and told them to give her something to eat. The first thing that we're going to look at today is that we can believe in the timing of Jesus. You see, this scene unfolds, if you're familiar with Mark, in an increasingly familiar way. Jesus and his crew roll up on the boat and come out, and there's a huge crowd waiting for them, just pressing in to hear every word of this powerful, revolutionary teacher. And we see in this text another Markan sandwich. You say, sandwich, that sounds delicious. It's not that kind of sandwich. It's not a Monte Cristo. It's not a Reuben. It's a literary device in which the author interrupts one telling of a story to tell another story, and by doing that, he draws out deeper meaning in both of them. And so first, we see a man desperately in need of healing for his young daughter because she is in dire straits. And then we see that story is interrupted by a woman who also needs healing. And both help teach and reinforce why Jesus is worthy of our trust. And one of the lessons we learn is the timing of Jesus. So it says that Jairus came to Jesus with an urgent need, and he fell at Jesus' feet. Now, Jairus, we're told, was one of the rulers of the synagogue. He was like a lay leader that helped to take care of the temple business and keep it in order. Now, what's interesting is we've already talked about how one of Jesus' biggest opposition points were the religious leaders. So it's helpful to know that not all religious leaders were against Jesus. There were some that were believing, and Jairus was one of them. And he comes to Jesus in pure desperation. Could you imagine the agony of this father who comes to Jesus and says, "My daughter is dying"? Now, for any of us that are parents, we know that sick, helpless feeling when something's happening to one of your kids, and it's terrifying. I am a dad who, when my kids were all young, had to take each of them to the ER on different occasions. One, because of a breathing issue that was pretty scary. One, because she tumbled down a full set of stairs. And the third, because she thought it'd be a good idea to put a light bright up her nose. Good news, I'll let you figure out who's who. I'm not pointing any fingers. And the good news is it all worked out. And so they're all kind of like looking away like, who's his daughter? But listen, the point is, in each of those moments, it worked out. Now I see the end of the story. But in those moments, it was terrifying. It was a horrible feeling. And you can imagine Jairus, this guy who likely has some prominence, some means, some influence in the community. You know what? All the material wealth, it means nothing when the person that you love is there helpless and you have no control over that situation. And so he comes to Jesus because he believes Jesus has the power to do something about it. And he says, "Please come and put your hands on her so she'll be healed and live." And so Jesus went. Now, how's that for great timing? Jairus comes with this dire need, and Jesus responds immediately. He says, "Great, let's go with you." So far, so good. And they went, and the crowd was thronging Jesus, and all of a sudden, the other sandwich in the story emerges. And we're introduced to this woman who has a flow of blood, an issue for 12 years, and it seems to be some sort of severe menstrual issue. But whatever it is, she suffered for a long time. Now, some of us, if we've suffered with chronic pain, you know the agony that can bring. It's just this constant thing that you have to deal with, how debilitating it could be. And what we're told is she suffered much under many physicians and had spent all that she had looking to get better, yet was no better, but rather grew worse. So this malady took everything from this woman. Yet in a desperate act of faith, she touches Jesus, believing that act would heal her, and in fact it did. We'll come back to this in a little bit, but the timing is amazing. A woman who had just struggled for so long suddenly touches Jesus. She had nothing left. She touches him, and it says immediately she was healed. In an instant, not a gradual process. It said immediately this disease dried up and she felt in her body she was healed of disease. Now, could you imagine, put yourself in the shoes of this woman who had suffered for 12 years and she's just like, my final desperate act, I'm going to just touch his garment, and now is suddenly healed. You could imagine how overwhelmed she was, how much gratitude there was for her, and that would be amazing. And so what happens next, though, is both amazing and revealing, and it demonstrates sometimes why we struggle with the timing of Jesus. Because Jesus is walking with Jairus, and remember, there's no time to spare. His daughter is dying, and yet Jesus suddenly stops everything to do what would appear to be a fool's errand. He said, "Who touched my garments?" Now, his disciples were astounded. They're like, "Jesus, everyone's grabbing you, and you're talking about who touched you? Who didn't touch you? Like, we're just trying to do crowd control here." But Jesus didn't let it go. He kept going until he found the woman, and when she revealed herself, Jesus stopped to engage in a conversation with her. Now, if you're Jairus, there's probably two thoughts simultaneously going on in your mind. One, you're encouraged by Jesus' interaction with this woman because, wow, I went to Jesus thinking he could heal, and I just saw him heal a person. So that's got to bolster your confidence a little bit that he can do for your daughter what you hoped he would. But at the same time, on the other hand, if you're him, let's just be honest what you're thinking. You're thinking, "Jesus, what are you doing? I told you my daughter is at death's door, and you're stopping to have a philosophical, find out who touched your clothes? Does it really matter? You want to have some kind of faith lesson with this woman? Can you get her number? Can you text her later?" Like, we got to get going, Jesus. Time is of the essence. This is urgent. Some of you can relate to that today. You have a need. Perhaps you're like the woman who's been dealing with something for a very long time, and you're hoping God will do something about that. It's wiped you out. Or maybe you're like Jairus, and maybe it's a more recent thing, but it's an urgent thing, and you're hoping that Jesus will do something and give you immediate help. But sometimes it feels like Jesus' timing is suspect, doesn't it? Why isn't God showing up in this moment? Maybe you've struggled in some different ways. Maybe you've been single for a long time, and you've been at too many times where you've been the best man or the bridesmaid, and you're hoping for a center spot soon enough. And maybe that's an issue for you. Maybe your issue is you are married, and you're going through some difficult things. And marriage is amazing, but there are some difficult points at times. And maybe you're looking for a breakthrough there. Maybe your need is physical, and you're dealing kind of like with some of the people we talked about in today's stories, that you're dealing with a physical issue you're hoping for some relief from. Maybe you're struggling with a crippling habit or an anxious mind that you've been asking God to deal with, and you're just not finding any relief. And you've had the faith to ask Jesus about whatever it is that you're going through, and yet, again, his timing feels suspect. It maybe even feels uncaring. Now, for Jairus, this actually gets worse. Because while Jesus is having this conversation with this woman, someone came up to Jairus and told him, "Your daughter has died." That seems pretty reckless on the part of the divine physician, right? But listen, it's a perfect opportunity to teach a deeper faith lesson that Jairus had just observed, because we don't understand all that's going on behind the scenes with God, and that's an important reminder for us today. We don't understand everything, but we can trust in God's timing. I don't know about you, but I've had a lot of 11:59 moments with God. The very last moment. I wish he'd show up at 3 o'clock, and then I could just rest the rest of the time. But that's not always how it works, because our faith is stretched. And listen, even when it feels like you've been waiting a long time, even if it feels like God's being irresponsible, we can trust his timing, because we can also trust, and this is the second thing if you're taking notes, we can trust the power of Jesus. When when this woman touched Jesus, two interesting things happened. One, first of all, she was instantly healed. We talked about that. But the second thing is that Jesus felt power had gone out of his body. You see, power had been transferred from this woman. It left Jesus and was transferred to her. And so that's what Jesus does for us. He transfers his divine power on our behalf. And so when we say we don't stop believing, it's because we believe in somebody that has the power to do what they say. When one of my daughters was little, she had this great vision. She says, "Dad, I want to be really rich." I said, "Okay." And she says, "I want to live in a huge mansion." I said, "That's great." And she said, and then I'm going to adopt all the poor kids, and they're going to live with me. And Dad, you can come too. And I was like, I don't know, she's like, thought like I'm one of the poor kids. It doesn't matter. It's a really nice thought. And I'm like, man, that's exciting. Now, the thing is, it's adorable, and it's an admirable dream. But to this point, we're not ruling it out, but she doesn't have the power yet to make this happen. So while it's a cool thing, I wouldn't want to, I don't put money in my retirement account. My daughter's got this. I'm going to be in her mansion, right? That would be foolish because it's a good thought. It's a good heart. But we have to have the ability to make it happen. You see, Jesus not only talks a good game, but he's got the power to back up what his words say. And that is the difference maker. He's the one we would do well to put our trust in, to believe in, to put our faith in. And so it's important to take a moment to ask, what does it actually mean to have faith in Jesus? Faith is this. Faith isn't just belief. Faith equals belief in action. It's not just saying I believe, but it's stepping out and saying I believe enough to put my weight into this, my life into this. You've heard probably the old illustration, it's like a chair. All of you today demonstrated faith that the chair would hold you up when you sat down. I'm thankful that your faith is rewarded. We do have general liability insurance, but we don't want to have to make claims, and we want you to be healthy and happy here. So that's the thing. But here's the thing. Faith in life is putting your weight into God and trusting him with your life, risking everything on God, believing God can hold you up. And faith is a powerful thing. So after Jesus found the woman, he said, "Daughter, your faith has made you well. Go in peace and be healed of your disease." Now this begs the question, what healed the woman? Was it Jesus' power, or was it her faith that made her well? But listen, here's what we have to remember. Faith doesn't gain its value from the one who expresses it, but from the object in which it rests. So her faith didn't actually heal her, but it did unlock the power of Jesus on her behalf as she put her faith into action, touched Jesus, believing he could heal. And it's important and relieving for us to know that Jesus can work with an imperfect faith. I don't know about you, but I had faith, but I haven't always had perfect faith. And Jesus can work even with that. You see, this woman sort of had a magical belief in Jesus. If only I can touch him, get healed, and then kind of scurry off into anonymity. You see, many of us think of God as an impersonal magic charm at times too. It's like we just don't understand proper Pistology, which is the study of faith, not anger. Some of you will get that later. But listen, even if we don't have everything worked out, here's what we know. Jesus can act on the little bit of flawed faith that we have. And that's good news for you today. And there are some teachings, and I just want to say this. I reject this teaching. Some have been told that you have not been healed because you lack faith. I would reject that. God does not count on a perfect faith, and we don't want to put that trip on top of anybody. We trust in Jesus, and Jesus can act on that. And so this woman with an imperfect faith experiences a perfect healing, and it's an amazing thing. But again, this instructive lesson is interrupted by an alarming faith challenge, because remember, while these two were still talking, Jesus is talking to the woman, she's experiencing this lesson in faith. Someone comes to Jairus and says, "Listen, your daughter is dead." And these are the most horrific, soul-crushing words that a parent could hear. And you could imagine he must have been devastated in this moment. He's hearing it as Jesus is talking about believing and trusting. We're not told what Jairus said next, but we can imagine he must have been crushed. And yet now Jesus turns to him and he directs the faith lesson squarely at Jairus. He says this, "Do not fear, only believe." Again, words to embed deep into your soul today, because faith and fear are the opposites. It doesn't mean we never experience fear. God gave us fear, and it's healthy in certain places in life. But as an operating principle in life, are you governed by faith or are you governed by fear? And that's what we're getting at today, and they are opposites. But Jesus is asking a lot of this man. Jairus came to him and said, "I believe you could heal my daughter." Now Jesus is asking him to believe that he could raise him from the dead. Something no one had seen, something crazy to see. And yet growing in faith means that while we have an imperfect faith, that we face progressive challenges to our faith. The faith that was tested yesterday may experience greater testing tomorrow. We believe Jesus can heal. Like, hey, can you pray for me? I got a cold. Oh, sure, no problem, brother. Jesus, just heal that cold. But hey, I've got cancer. Okay, do you know that it's not harder for God to cure cancer than it is a cold? And I know I'm not minimizing serious disease. What I'm saying is we're emphasizing the power of a God that stands before us. And so the other side is, do we have faith as we progressively grow in our faith to trust in Jesus even when he doesn't heal, believing that he's got something else planned for us and he's working in the midst of that. And so it's important. So Jesus says, do not fear, only believe. Now, the original Greek language there implies the idea to continue believing or keep on believing. So Jesus is telling us, regardless of what you see with your eyes or what you hear, what your circumstances are, don't stop believing. And he said it long before Steve Perry said it, right? So Jesus was the original one. And when they arrive at the house, the professional mourners were wailing loudly. And Jesus said, listen, cut the racket. She's not dead. She's sleeping. And then they proceeded to ridicule Jesus. And that group represents the cynics of the ages. The moment you say you put your trust in God, that you believe in him, that for something that defies human power and ability, you will face ridicule. You've probably already experienced that. This is nothing new. And what I want to encourage you is don't let the skeptics and don't let the cynics eat away and chip away at your faith. Don't stop believing. Jesus enters the room of this 12-year-old girl, and he takes her by the hand. He gently speaks to her, and he tells her to get up. And she does. Could you imagine how much that resurrection that day bolstered the faith of everyone around that experienced this? Just in the same way that the resurrection of Jesus bolsters the faith of everyone today, because it demonstrates his ultimate power and authority over everything in life, including death. So listen, no matter what you're facing, even to the point of faith, don't stop believing in Jesus and his ultimate power and authority in your life. He is one to put your trust in. Now listen, what we're talking about today works not only on a community, on a personal level, but also in your family, and it also works in a community. Because today, as a brand new church, God has given us a big vision of what we want to see take place. We want to help people really get focused and make their one life count and be super intentional in all areas of life, helping people grow with intentional discipleship, with each person having a personal growth plan that they live out, and then helping others do the same. We're believing in time God will help touch, reach hundreds and even thousands of people. It doesn't mean that that's our church size, that we have impact as we go out into the community. And we believe all that, and you might say, what audacity for this little church start to believe these things. But here's what I'm telling you. We know that that will never happen unless God shows up in great power on our behalf. And that's what we're believing in. Not me, not my ability, who stumbles his words all the time, not in any individual. We believe in the power of Jesus to do what he's called us to do as we respond and say, yes, we'll move in your direction. So listen, we can keep believing despite the timing of Jesus, which feels off sometimes. We can keep on believing because of his power. But the last thing we're going to look at today is we can keep believing because the love of Jesus. In order to trust, to have total faith in someone like Jesus, it's important to know that they have the power to do what they say. But you know that's not enough. We also need to know that they care enough and care about you and your well-being enough to do or not do the very best thing for us. For example, if I had money troubles, I believe with all my heart that Elon Musk is financially able to help me out. However, it would be foolish for me to put my trust in that because he doesn't care about me, because he doesn't even know who I am, which I know you're all shocked by, right? It's like, how could that be? But listen, why would Elon care? There's no relationship. But you know, the opposite is true with Jesus. Not only does Jesus have the power, he has a love for us, enough to help us. And that's one more reason we can keep believing in him. Consider this woman. She was a nobody that Jesus made somebody. She is a perfect foil for Jairus because Jairus had money, he had position, he had privilege, all the things that anyone could want. And yet this woman had nothing. She isn't even named in the account. She spent all her money trying to get fixed, and yet she remained in this condition. And because her condition would have left her ceremonially unclean in Levitical law, she was also isolated, so she was alone, had nothing. She's the opposite of Jairus. And yet both of them placed their faith in Jesus, and both of them experienced his power. But they're opposite in another important way. You see, Jairus sought after Jesus, but Jesus sought after this woman. He came to her. Sure, she came to touch his clothes, but it was impersonal. She wasn't looking for Jesus, she was looking for relief to get better. And let's be honest, many of us, when we first came to Jesus, we wanted him to fix our problems, but we really didn't know what we were getting ourselves into. But you know, that's not enough for Jesus. She wanted healing, but he wanted a relationship, a connection. And so he sought her out right after he healed her, and he established that connection. He cared about this woman. He loved this woman. He desired a relationship, even knowing that he had everything to offer. And she really had nothing to offer him, which is exactly like us. Think about it. What do we really have to offer God that he doesn't already have? I would say it's not much. We do have our hearts, and to him that's a lot, which is fantastic. And that's something for us to consider today, is remember, Jesus desires a relationship with you. Don't settle for religion when Jesus offers you a relationship. God isn't a mystical, impersonal force, a good luck charm that we keep up there with our rabbit's foot when we need it. No, he's powerful, and he's personal, and he desires a relationship with you. But here's something amazing to consider too. As powerful as he is, he's also tender. We especially see that when he resurrects this little girl. You see, first we go from this woman who had been dealing with an issue for 12 years, and then we go to a little 12-year-old girl who had just died. And Jesus shows his power by doing what nobody else would believe that she could do or that he could do. And he told her, arise from the dead. And she did. It's unbelievable, but in his tenderness, he also shines through. He says, little girl, I say to you, arise. Now, the English translation of that word doesn't carry the full implication. It also means lamb. So did you notice how tender Jesus was? He doesn't go into the room, start flicking the light switch on and off. Hey, get up, let's go. We got to get moving. I got demons to cast out, people to heal, things to do, sermons to preach. Like that's not Jesus' heart at all. The God who came from heaven to earth, who humbled himself, became a baby, grew up a man, is on ministry, and yes, he's going to do big things, including the cross, including the resurrection, stops, and he cares enough for this little girl to address her. And he holds her hand, and he speaks tenderly to her. Little girl, it's time to wake up. Imagine a parent coming and saying, wake up, honey. Think of just a loving parent in that moment. And that's what Jesus is. And so she wakes up, and you can imagine she's been sick, so she probably hasn't eaten, hasn't had an appetite. But Jesus says, go get her some food. And so suddenly her vitality and her appetite all return. And that's a very fitting picture of what Jesus has done for us. You and I, prior to Jesus, we're all spiritually dead. And yet nothing in the world could save us, but Jesus grabbed us by the hand and said, arise, wake up, and we live again. And now we have new healthy appetites that are restored. And so Jesus, he doesn't just touch and run. He doesn't heal and peel. He sticks around. He cares enough. See, that's good. You guys can quote that if you want there. Jesus cares enough to save, but he's loving enough to stay, to stick around and minister in that situation. And so though we, like that woman or like that little girl, may feel powerless in a situation, we may feel overwhelmed by it, we've got nothing to offer, and yet Jesus dotes over us. Now, when it comes to believing, it's important that we do, because without faith in this world, your life is going to be ruled by fear. I can tell you again, you either are ruled by faith or fear. So if you don't have faith, there is fear that is ruling your life in some way. And over time, you will be crushed by the weight of it, by the weight of all things in life, including death. But it's also important to consider that our belief must be properly centered. Again, it has to be in someone who has the ability and the desire to do something about it. And Jesus, my friends, shows us over and over that he is that person. Do you feel like you've been waiting too long for something in your life? Maybe that you're too far gone? Well, what I want to encourage you today is what might feel like a lack of concern on Jesus' part could be Jesus waiting and trying to teach us something and have an encounter. What I also want to tell you is what may feel insurmountable to you and what is insurmountable can be overcome by a word and a touch of Jesus. And when it feels like nobody cares and nobody understands what's going on in your life, Jesus pursues you, speaking tender words of comfort, telling you, "Little lamb, I say to you, arise." So whatever you do, don't stop believing in Jesus. Would you join me in a word of prayer?